Hello and welcome to VCC TV. I'm Joseph Rai, and we'll be in conversation with Philippe Serres, who's Regional Manager for South Asia at French development finance institution Proparco, which has been investing in India for a little over 10 years. A warm welcome to you, Philippe, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
So my first question to you is, Proparco has been investing in India for a little over 10 years. It has committed over $500 million in the country. So give us a sense of the investments that Proparco has made in India, and what has been your key learning?
Yes, sure. Thank you very much. So, yes, indeed, Proparco started operating in India in 2008, so 11 years exactly. And since then, we have committed around $650 million, so actually a bit more than $500 million. This portfolio is quite diversified. However, there's a big concentration on energy. And when we say energy, it's mainly renewable energy. We've been supporting the Indian government policy on development of renewables, so a lot in hydro, in solar and wind. And apart from the energy part, the rest is really quite well diversified in agribusiness, financial inclusion, education, healthcare, manufacturing, and some smaller deals, let's say, in telecommunications. But these are smaller transactions. And I think that the main lesson that we can draw from that is that India is the best example of an emerging country. Okay. So from India, actually, we draw many lessons about what are the different features of an emerging economy in terms of risks, but also in terms of opportunities, which sectors are actually growing quicker, so that we can actually use that to other investments we are doing in other countries.
Okay, that's interesting. So will your investment pace in India increase going forward?
Yes, definitely. I mean, for us, India is definitely a country for which we have a lot of appetite. The only constraint that we have, and we always will have, is our country limit. As any financial institution, we have a country limit which is determined by our own equity. So we have to keep looking at that. So there are some periods in which we cannot invest as much as we would like, or where we have to stop a bit the pace. Okay. But whenever we have a country limit which is increased because there are some repayments, or because we have increased our own equity, then we continue making investments. So today, we are not stopping investments, we are continuing. It's just that sometimes we have to look at where we are in the country limit so that we manage that by going a bit slower, for example, in some cases.
So in terms of sectors, you said that your portfolio is concentrated primarily in renewable. Yeah. And this year, you also increased exposure to banking and NBFC. So going forward, which sectors will you look at more?
I think that within the infrastructure space, we will try to do something more than renewables. We've been very focused on renewables. We would like, as a private sector social investor, to look at other sectors within the infra, like water and sanitation, like ports, like waste management, which are also contributing to our sustainable development mandate. One thing which is very important is that since we are quite committed to climate change mitigation, we cannot support all type of infrastructure. So when I talk about infrastructure, I'm talking about infrastructure that goes towards climate change mitigation, which will be a lot about water, as I was saying, waste management. When we talk about roads or ports, for example, we can look at those, but looking very carefully at what impact it has in terms of CO2 emissions. Okay. But yeah, overall, I think that this is a sector where we see a lot of opportunities for concessions or PPPs where the private sector lenders can play a role, and where we would like ourselves to diversify our investments so that we are not only doing renewables. We will continue doing renewables, but we want to go there. And then maybe if we look at other sectors, we would like to do a bit more on education, for example. It's a social sector where, as per our mandate, we'll be very happy to invest more. It's difficult to find opportunities, but definitely we would like to go a bit more.
What kind of themes within the education sector?
I think education is quite diversified, so you can look both at brick and mortar education centers. It can be universities, it can be schools chains, even kindergartens chains as they are being developed right now. But we can also look at content developers who are commercializing software or different contents for the students, for the teachers, which is also, I know, a big market opportunity in India.
Right. You were also quite bullish on healthcare after the government announced the Ayushman Bharat scheme last year. So what kind of opportunities do you see in this space?
So in healthcare, where we're actually quite involved is through private equity funds. So we're investors in a fund like Quadria. Actually, we invested in Fund 1 and in Fund 2 recently. We might also support healthcare through other funds. We think that's the best way for us to operate as a DFI because there is a big need for equity. It's difficult sometimes to provide local currency. We can do it, but it's more difficult. So it's easier for us to come on equity than on debt. And so in the healthcare space, it could be through the funds or through direct investments, investing equity in hospital chains, in single specialty chains as well, laboratories, also the PPP setups, which we can see now in some hospitals for diagnosis or laboratories. So this kind of investments.
Okay, that's really interesting. So you also made an investment in a fintech company, Neo Growth. You provided debt. So you provide both debt and equity in companies. So give us a sense of the landscape of the fintech landscape in the country, because fintech has attracted a lot of investor interest in the past years.
So as a foreign investor with, of course, a view on the whole economy, my understanding of fintech is really, I would say, I wouldn't qualify myself as an expert on fintech, but I would say that what I can observe is that there is a huge growth on the fintech sector in India, much more than actually what we can see in other countries where we operate, for example, in Africa or even other countries in Asia. It's quite impressive what is happening in India right now in terms of fintech. So within this very dynamic sector, what we are trying to focus on is on those fintechs that still have some similarity with the brick and mortar traditional NBFC. Okay. The pure play app-based fintech is something that we do not really understand, to be frank. I think you need to be much more tech oriented, which as a DFI we are not yet. Okay. So what we're trying to look at is NBFCs who use technology to improve credit appraisal processes, to be more efficient in appraising loans, in recovering loans, in internal systems, in risk management, who use, for example, different algorithms to help decision-making whenever they're going to lend to a client, but who are still going to have agencies, branches, loan officers to have a direct contact with the clients. And within that space, we think there is a role to play, because really you can, as I was saying, be more efficient and more quality-oriented in your portfolio when you use technology. And that's how, for example, we supported Neo Growth, and we can look at other ones. But we want to be quite selective in this sector, because sometimes you can observe a growth which is too fast and which is based really on a lot of technology and not too much knowledge of the client itself.
Okay. It's interesting that you admitted that you're not so, as a DFI, you're not so tech oriented, but that seems to be the way forward, right? And so, what as Proparco, what are you doing in order to enhance your tech orientation?
Sure. So actually, we have developed recently a sort of digital mandate. It's a whole part now of what we can do, basically, as a DFI. And we are looking at opportunities in the digital space, but digital doesn't mean only fintechs. Digital can be also servers. It can also be use of digital technologies for telecommunications, even for energy, where you can optimize, for example, the use of energy through different applications that can lead to energy efficiency. So this is something that we are developing right now, but at the global level. So far we haven't really done any digital transaction in India, but we have done others in other countries, in Mexico, in South Africa, and this is where we want to develop more our tech, let's say, knowledge. Okay,
so you've also done fund-of-fund investments. You said that you've also invested in Quadria. Besides, you've also invested in Low Capital, Rabo, and Avishkar as well. And in your recent interaction with us, you also said that you wanted to invest in generalist funds. How is that shaping up?
Yes. So why did we invest in all those funds we were mentioning? Is because Proparco has a very clear mandate in India, which is twofold. First, sustainable development or sustainable growth, and then the other one is social sectors. So we were initially, over the last 10 years of operations, looking at funds which are very focused on those two sectors. So that's why we went into healthcare fund, agribusiness funds, which are very social, or we went into funds like SAGF, managed by GEF last year, which is more focused on climate change and resource efficiency. Now, our view right now is that in order to really support the growth story of India, you also have to look at more sector-agnostic funds, which will be also looking at consumer, at financial sector, maybe at manufacturing. And within those sectors, which are much more diversified, of course, they will continue having the same ESG approach that we require, which is based on good governance, environmental and social risks mitigation. So we cannot just be focused on those sectors, but we need to basically support the development of the private sector in India, but by focusing on those funds that will have a strong focus on ESG and therefore are going to ultimately support sustainable development goals. So that's why now we're looking to invest in sector-agnostic funds, different sizes, mainly mid-market focused.
Okay. Cool. So, for every investor, exits are important, and you've done some partial exits as well as full exits. Give us a sense of, the exit pipeline that you have, and how bullish are you on exits in India?
Okay. So, in terms of exits, for the time being, we don't have that many exits. Actually, most of the equity investment we have right now are funds. So, for that, will depend on the fund managers. Yeah. I would say we have some investments which are direct investment, but those are still a bit early, so we'll see how they perform. It's not something that we will be looking for an exit right now, and I think it's good that these exits are happening maybe in a few years, because it's not maybe the best moment to go for exits right now in India. At the same time, as I was saying some months ago, that valuations are very high in India. Right now the market is quite unstable. It's difficult to know what is the right valuation for companies in India right now. So let's wait a bit and see how the valuations are going to stabilize, also based on the evolutions of the stock market, which is right now showing some evolutions.
Thank you, Philippe. It was a pleasure talking to you. And thank you all for watching. And do subscribe VCC TV for more updates on private equity and venture capital news.